Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is one of the most effective books in the world about human relations. If you want to improve your social, I could be more influential and improve your leadership skills, then this book must be your Bible, even though the book was written for years ago. It is still applicable today, and because of that, it is one of the highest sold books in the world. In this video, I will summarize the entire book after watching the video. You can see that you have read this book because it covers every single chapter and every bit of important information. Part 1. Fundamental Techniques in Handling People. Chapter 1. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. People rarely criticize themselves for their actions, no matter how mistaken they may be. It's essential to recognize that individuals are emotional beings driven by ego and pride. Criticizing them often puts them on the defensive, prompting them to justify their actions. Even family members of criminals may enter a state of denial, attributing blame to the system rather than the person responsible for the crime. Criticism can hurt a person's pride and sense of importance, leading to resentment that can endure for a lifetime. A vivid example of handling a critical situation without criticism is the story of renowned test pilot Bob Hoover. After an air show in San Diego, both engines of his plane suddenly failed. Through skillful flying, he managed to land the damaged aircraft safely. The cause of the engine failure was traced back to the accidental filling of World War II propeller planes with jet fuel at the airport. Despite the potential for severe consequences, Hoover did not criticize or berate the mechanics responsible. Instead, he chose to demonstrate his faith in them by having the same mechanic service his plane the next day. Hoover's benevolent approach might be attributed to his understanding of a principle discovered by psychologist B.F. Skinner. Animals rewarded for good behavior learn more effectively than those punished for bad behavior. This principle applies to people as well. Criticizing them does not encourage positive change because they are primarily driven by emotions rather than reason. Anyone can criticize or complain, but it takes true character to understand and forgive. Chapter 2. Give honest and sincere appreciation. One of the most potent motivators of human behavior is the yearning to be appreciated by others. Everyone enjoys receiving compliments and hearing that they are doing a commendable job. Some argue that the foundation of all civilization ultimately rests upon the human desire to feel important, seeking approval and recognition that drives us to climb the highest mountains, write novels, and establish multi-million-dollar companies. Expressing appreciation doesn't require bestowing fancy titles. Simple phrases like "thank you" and "I'm sorry" can suffice. However, it is crucial to offer sincere and honest praise. Avoid showering people with phony flattery, as they can easily see through it. Shift your focus away from yourself for a moment and concentrate on acknowledging the positive qualities of the person in front of you. Additionally, make an effort to make the other person feel important. To adopt the right mindset, consider the perspective of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who believed that every person he met was superior to him in certain ways, providing an opportunity to learn and appreciate from others. Alternatively, reflect on the golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated. By applying these principles, you can positively impact those around you. Take a moment to observe the tired and underappreciated service employees during your day. Inject a bit of appreciation into their routine, leaving sparks of acknowledgement. You'll be surprised by the positive reactions you receive. As people's hunger for recognition is satisfied, you'll naturally become someone others like and enjoy working with. Most importantly, you'll have a positive impact on the lives of those around you. Chapter 3. Appeal to another person's interests. Just as you wouldn't bait a fishing hook with cheesecake when aiming to catch a fish, it's essential to understand that people, like fish, have their own desires and interests. While it's natural to be interested in what you want, it's crucial to recognize that everyone else is similarly focused on their own desires. Influencing others requires addressing their wants and demonstrating how they can achieve them. Every individual in the world knows what they want and cares about what they receive. When engaging with others, approach the conversation by pausing and asking yourself, what can the other person get out of this? Challenge yourself. to refrain from immediately expressing your own desires. Instead, relentlessly convey that your primary intention is to assist them. In a world full of self-seeking individuals, someone who unselfishly serves others gains a significant advantage. An anecdote about Andrew Carnegie illustrates this principle. Carnegie had a sister-in-law whose children never responded to his letters. Determined to receive a reply without explicitly asking for one, he wrote a letter without mentioning his desire for a response. In a clever twist, he casually added at the end that he was sending a $5 bill. True to form, they promptly replied, expressing gratitude for his letter and inquiring about the whereabouts of the money. By understanding and addressing the interests of others before expressing your own desires, you can create meaningful connections and gain a distinct advantage in influencing those around you. Part 2. 6 Ways to Make People Like You. Chapter 1. Become genuinely interested in other people. Few beings are universally loved as much as a friendly and approachable dog. Dogs are always excited to see you, making you feel like the most important thing in their world. Similarly, showing genuine interest in other people can make them feel important. People are naturally drawn to those who admire them because, let's face it, everyone is primarily interested in themselves throughout their entire lives. Consider this. When looking at a group photo, whose face do you instinctively seek out first? The principle is simple. Making friends becomes much easier when you show genuine interest in others rather than trying to make them interested in you. Begin conversations by asking people about their backgrounds and goals. Remember the challenges they face, and when you come across solutions, share them. Go out of your way to engage with individuals who might be considered beneath your level, such as employees who don't report to you or service personnel. Similarly, connect with people above your level by expressing a sincere interest in them, their work, and their advice. When you genuinely engage with others, they feel important and appreciated, fostering a positive connection. This approach allows them to share the secrets of their success, further strengthening your bond. Chapter 2. Smile. I smile and I like you. You make me happy. It's good to see you. A smile is a powerful message of goodwill. Once upon a time, a New York stockbroker named William B. Steinhardt decided to embark on something new based on the advice of an author. Steinhardt, previously known as a notorious grouch who rarely smiled in his personal or professional life, committed to a simple yet transformative experiment, smiling more. Giving himself a pep talk in front of the mirror each morning, Steinhardt began his experiment by greeting his wife with a smile, then extending it to the doorman of his building, the cashier at the subway, the traders on the trading floor, and his colleagues in the office. The results were remarkable. People started smiling back at him. Steinhardt noted that there was more happiness in the first 2 months of the experiment than in the entire year before. Moreover, he found that complaints and grievances at work became easier to handle, ultimately resulting in increased revenue. In short, he became a richer and happier man. This story illustrates that a smile can go a long way. When someone smiles at us, we tend to automatically like them. The smile of a baby, for instance, immediately warms our hearts, much like the sheer delight a dog exhibits upon seeing us. If you want to make yourself instantly likable to someone, show them that you're happy to see them. Be smiling when you meet them. The happiness you convey will be reciprocated, creating a positive and welcoming interaction. Chapter 3. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. A name is a person's identity. It makes them unique among all others. This is a principle I always ignored before. Whenever I met someone new, I would hear their name and after 5 seconds forget it. When I needed their name, I would always excuse myself by saying, "I'm so sorry. I'm so bad with names. Could you please repeat your name again?" After reading the book, I noticed that this was a huge mistake. When you remember another person's name, it shows that you really listened and cared when you were talking. Using names reduces barriers and makes other people feel closer to you. These days, when I meet someone, I really pay attention to the first few seconds when they mention their name. Instead of just saying, "Nice to meet you," I always say, "Nice to meet you, Tom." By repeating the name, I remember it better. and it makes the other person feel connected to me. So next time when you go to the gym or somewhere else, instead of saying, "How are you today?" say, "How are you today, Thomas?" You will start seeing the difference. Saying the name is a subtle and welcome compliment. Forgetting it is a crippling mistake that suggests you don't care enough to get it right. People pay loads of money to have their name remembered after they die. Naming buildings, having parks dedicated to their names. A business person who can't remember the name of an important client is simply saying that they don't care about a big portion of their business. Carnegie wanted to merge with a company called Pullman. When Carnegie mentioned that the new company would still be called Pullman, Pullman became far more eager. If you are having difficulty remembering names, then make sure to catch it when it comes up the first time in a conversation and ask for it to be repeated or even spelled out if needed. Then, repeat it back to the person multiple times during the conversation. Finally, when you are alone, make some type of connection to remember it better. Chapter 4. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. A person's life is the most important life for that person. A person's head means more to them than a famine that has affected 1 million people. Allowing someone to talk makes that person feel important and valued. Everyone has gone through what they feel to be tough times, and they like to talk about them. If they have overcome challenges, ask about this. Even better, combine this with another type, which is sincere appreciation, and praise them for how fascinating their stories are. Express how you wish you had their knowledge or experience during a conversation. Most people are so preoccupied with what they themselves want to say next that they barely listen to the other person at all. Truly listening means making a conscious effort to give the other person your full attention, and the benefits of this approach are substantial. The author attended a dinner party in New York where he met a botanist, a Bathurst, having never met one before. The author listened to him for hours as he described exotic plants. Later, the botanist remarked to others about what an interesting conversationalist the author was. Surprisingly, the author had barely said anything at all. He had been a good, interested listener. Before reading the book, the author never paid attention to this principle. During conversations, he was always waiting for the person to finish talking so that he could change the topic to his interest areas. While the person was talking, he was constantly thinking about the things he would say when the person finished. When the person was done, he would unload the information that he thought was interesting. Chapter 5. Talk in terms of the other person's interest. Using an earlier analogy of pairing whitefish with cheesecake and fish with the bait that the partners want, people are usually far more enthusiastic about topics they care about than ones only you care about. Before meeting someone, research their interests so you have a working knowledge of the field, identify their major goals, then talk about how you'll help them get closer to those goals. For example, my goal with this YouTube channel is to reach 15,000 subscribers in the next 4 months. In order to hit that target, if I come up to you and say, "Guys, please subscribe to my channel because I have a target to reach," then you probably wouldn't care. That doesn't mean anything to you at all. Instead, if I can provide you with some useful information in this video and add positive value to your life, and only after that, ask you to subscribe and enable notifications to benefit from my future videos, there's a bigger chance that you would do it. Because if you are watching this video, I'm assuming that you are interested in your personal growth, and seeing my future videos might be interesting for you. As you can see, I didn't even mention my target. I was talking about the benefits you will get. Chapter 6. Make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. Almost all the people you meet feel superior to you in some way. Let them realize in some subtle way that you acknowledge their importance. Conversely, avoid doing things that undermine the other person and make them feel small or unimportant. Give praise without expecting anything in return, simply to radiate happiness and uplift them. This principle is a kind of recap of the previous principles, so I won't spend too much time on it. Part 3. 12 ways to win people to your way of thinking. Praise is all well and good, but what do you do when someone disagrees with you? That's the next subject of how to win friends and influence people. In summary, put aside your instinct to fight fire with fire. People don't like to be proven wrong. They don't like to admit that they have to change their minds. No matter how right you supposedly are, they crave importance and correction, assaulting their pride. You may think it's important that you're seen as the smartest person in the room, but you'll be resented for this. Chapter 1. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. With another person, it does not really make much sense. If you lose the argument. If you win, the other person will resent you for having hurt their pride, and you will still not have truly won them over. Then the argument will only make the other person stay stronger in their point of view than they were before. Therefore, the only solution is to avoid such disputes from the start. When an argument starts, distrust the first response that bubbles up in you, as it's usually an instinctively defensive one, and whatever you do, control your temper. Listen to what your opponent has to say without resistance or protest, and promise to carefully examine their thoughts. Try to find areas where you agree. This will help reduce your opponent's defensiveness. Chapter 2. Begin in a friendly way. A hostile attitude just invites reciprocal hostilities. People don't want to change their minds, and they can't be forced to agree with you. However, they may be led to think about it. Consider this. When making an animal come to you, do you chase after it snowshoeing or do you offer food? A drop of honey catches more flies than a gallon of gall. Someone had a tough landlord who increased his rent. Instead of complaining about how this was unfair, he talked about how much he appreciated the house and the way the landlord maintained the building. He expressed how he would like to stay another year, but couldn't afford it. Chapter 3. Show respect for the other person's opinion. Never say you're wrong. When accused of being wrong, people will defend their opinion vehemently, often losing sight of the main point, searching for small exceptions to prove their assertion true. We form beliefs and then develop irrational passions to defend them when anyone threatens to prove us wrong. Consider the story of how the author hired an interior decorator to make some curtains for his home. Afterward, he was shocked by the size of the bill. When he mentioned the price to a friend, she exclaimed that he had clearly been overcharged. Initially, the author defended his action, explaining that the high price was an indicator of quality. However, when another friend dropped in and presented the same curtains, this time the author admitted that he actually felt he had overpaid and regretted the purchase. This positive approach allowed him to friendly admit his mistake. Whenever you tell someone they're wrong, you're basically saying, "I'm smarter than you." This is a direct attack on their self-esteem, and they will want to retaliate because you are clearly disrespecting their opinions. Chapter 4. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. Once the author was walking his dog Rex in a nearby forest. Rex liked to run free and was not wearing a muzzle or leash. Unfortunately, they encountered a police officer who sternly told the author that this was illegal. However, just this once he'd let them off with a warning. The author abided, but Rex didn't like the muzzle. So pretty soon, they returned to their old ways. When the same officer spotted them again, this time even before the officer opened his mouth, the author himself expressed how very, very sorry he was and how unacceptable his mistake was. Normally, the officer would have probably been angry and issued a fine. But thanks to this upfront admission of guilt, the situation changed. The officer, rather than being upset, began acknowledging that the little dog really wasn't hurting anyone. He accepted Carnegie's apologies and let them continue on their way. Admitting your mistake helps because the other person is usually trying to feel important by criticizing you about your mistake. But the moment you admit your guilt, the situation completely changes. Now, in order to feel important, they can no longer attack you, but rather have to show generosity by forgiving you. This is exactly what made the police officer lenient in the example. So, the next time you realize you're in the wrong, admit it enthusiastically. It will produce better results, and you'll find it's actually much more enjoyable than having to defend yourself when the other person points out your mistake. Chapter 5. Let the other person do a great deal of talking. Someone who disagrees with you will not pay attention while they are craving for their own expression, so encourage them to express their ideas fully. I'm sure you have seen arguments where neither person was listening to the other because they felt like they were not being acknowledged by the other side. So, always resist the temptation to interrupt the person. This is costly every time you do it. Imagine there's an empty bottle that fills as the person talks. When she feels the bottle, she becomes much more receptive to new thoughts. Before the bottle is full, she feels unheard. Every time you interrupt, you empty the bottle, and she has to start again. Chapter 6. Honestly try to see things from the other person's point of view. If you were born in the same body as your partner, had her experiences, and saw the world through the same lens, you would, by definition, arrive at the same conclusions. Consider the other person's ideas and feelings as important as your own. Imagine looking outside from another person's body. Adopting this attitude is actually productive. It will help you discover your partner's interests and articulate your arguments to appeal to his interests. For example, put yourself in the interviewer's place. Do you think she enjoys the interview process and talking to different people? She also hopes that the next person who walks inside is going to be the right fit. She also wants to end the interview. Change your perspective. Instead of seeing an interview as a meeting to solve your problem, see it as a meeting to solve another party's problem. If you focus on their problems and explain how you will solve them, then your problem will be solved as well. Chapter 7. Be sympathetic to the other person's ideas and desires. Any upset person feels completely justified in their anger, no matter what you believe. Do you think when you're hungry, you say to yourself, "I know I'm being irrational, and my anger doesn't make sense, but I'm going to be angry anyway"? People are hungry for sympathies. They want us to recognize all that they feel. If we can sympathize with others, they will appreciate our side as well, and will often come around to our way of thinking. Chapter 8. Start with questions to which the other person will answer. Yes, every time someone says no, they get locked into defensiveness and consistency bias. So, don't start by talking about the areas in which you differ. Start with what you agree on. Get the person to say yes instead of pushing your conclusion on them. Guide them to your conclusion through a series of questions. This can sound like a trap if the person realizes what you're doing. It's better to do this in a genuine, patient tone instead of in the tone of already knowing the answer. Ask difficult questions with unclear answers, so it doesn't feel like you're trapping the person in a corner. This technique is used a lot by salespeople. For example, imagine I want to sell my book summary to you and I would say, "You seem to be a person who likes to read. Am I right?" You would answer, "Yes." Then I would go ahead and say, "Do you like saving money? Do you like saving time?" Most likely your answer would be yes again. Once I get these yes responses, I would then say, "Buy my book summary. It's exactly what you want. It will save you time, money, and you will read a book much faster." How do you feel at this point? You might feel like I trapped you into something you didn't want. Even if you liked my product, you would probably be turned off by my approach, and most likely would walk away. Chapter 9. Let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. People like their own ideas better than others. Coming up with their own ideas makes them feel smart and important. Executing their own ideas, instead of someone else's, gives them a feeling of control. For example, once I was negotiating with a quite tough person who did not like the compromise. After a while, I noticed that it would be very difficult to reach an agreement. So I decided to apply this tactic and said, "You know about this topic more than I do. You are the world's expert on this. So, I want to hear your opinion. How can we reach an agreement?" The person stopped for a moment and then started giving me advice and options. His approach changed from being an adversary to a mentor. After hearing all of his options, I chose one of them and decided to implement it. Since he gave me the options, he was much more engaged and interested in implementing it successfully. Chapter 10. Appeal to the noble motive. A person usually has two reasons for doing a thing, one that sounds good and a real one. Forget the real one. Appeal to their highest moral principles. For example, when someone is breaking an agreement, say that your impression of the person's character was one of high integrity. Give them some time to think about it. If they come back and want to continue, then you will accept it without hesitation. Admit that your judgment of character was wrong, but you still personally believe they are people of their word and will not break the agreement. We humans don't want to lose the nobler motives. Chapter 11. Dramatize your ideas. Attention is scarcer than ever before. Find ways to capture it without being gimmicky. Merely stating a truth isn't enough. The truth has to be made vivid, interesting, and dramatic. Find a way to visually represent the stakes. Cash register salesman observed a slow-moving checkout line. He told the owner he was losing a penny with every customer. He threw pennies on the floor to make the point. Imagine how effective this would be if he kept doing this repeatedly to illustrate the money lost. Steve Jobs famously introduced the iPod as 1,000 songs in your pocket, not talking about gigabytes of storage. Here are a few tactics on how you can apply this principle. 1. Provide a visual analysis. Show objects for size, speed, and cost. 2. Equate the opportunity to dollars. For example, your business is losing 1 Mercedes-Benz a day by not fixing this problem. I personally like this tactic and have used it a lot in the past. For example, when I was finishing my internship, I had to give a final presentation about the results. In total, we were around 25 students, and among them, my presentation was one of the most interesting ones. The reason is that when I was presenting, I did not talk about the boring tasks I did in Excel. I simply started by saying that my internship saved $13,000 for the company. Once I said this, every manager in the audience started listening very carefully and asked a lot of questions at the end. To be honest, I did the same boring things as other interns. I would say I did even less. The only difference was that I calculated the number of hours I had spent and then converted it into dollars. Since it wasn't a paid internship, I could easily say that I saved them money because of some paid work. I did the same job the company would have had to pay a salary for. Chapter 12. Throw down a challenge. When motivation doesn't work, organize a competition. This gets people going because they don't want to be second, and the desire for mastery and to excel is a fundamental driver of behavior. For example, if a person is unsure about their strength, don't scold them for being scared. It's a tough job. It'll take a big person to take care of the job. Part 4. Final part of this book is about changing people without giving offense or arousing resentment. Chapter 1. Begin with praise and honest appreciation. It's always easier to listen to unpleasant things after hearing praise about our good points. Without praise, it just sounds completely critical. When you are giving praise, avoid being formal. This is quite normal in the corporate world, where you can hear some formal praise and then a big critical point, and at the end, a small praise again. Instead, always try to give sincere and specific praise about specific items rather than generalities. This is even more effective when the person knows you are upset with the work and has come to you to complain. In this situation, if you give sincere appreciation, it's going to be a big surprise and will make the person receptive to your feedback. Chapter 2. Call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. Direct attacks on people's mistakes typically create resistance because people know what they've done wrong. Calling explicit attention creates resistance. Here are 2 tactics. First, follow your sincere praise not with but rather with and. Maybe you have heard that whatever comes before but doesn't count. Here are 2 examples for you to compare. 1. You've done an excellent job working hard, but you could have prevented these careless mistakes. 2. You've done an excellent job working hard, and if you focus next on building a checklist, you'll improve your accuracy. The second approach avoids the negative feeling of failure. The second tactic: if a task is slipping, do it yourself, then show the work to the person. For example, John Wanamaker saw customers being ignored at the size counter while the size people were chatting in the corner. He sized the woman himself and then handed the purchase to the people to be wrapped. Chapter 3. Talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. Mentioning your own mistakes before criticizing others shows that you recognize the task is difficult and the person's mistakes are understandable. It implicitly encourages the person to rise to your level. Carnegie said, "If you want to change people into your way of thinking, always talk about your own mistakes first before criticizing the other person. Never say, 'You are doing the wrong thing,' or 'You should not do that.' This would only push the other person into defense mode, and they will try to prove themselves right with every possible explanation. Instead, first talk about your own mistake. Tell them how you felt when you were in their shoes and how wrong you were. For example, I used to hire students for an internship program for a company that I worked for several years ago. During the interview process, I could see that many students couldn't express themselves well due to stress and tension. I'm sure you're familiar with that feeling. As soon as you enter the interview room, your IQ level drops and you can't even answer simple questions. This made my job difficult because it was hard to identify if the students didn't know the answer or if they just couldn't answer due to stress. The situation got even harder when the student was introverted, so I always tried to make them feel relaxed by telling them that it was just a friendly conversation and they shouldn't be stressed out. However, it never worked. One day, I decided to start the interview process with my own embarrassing interview stories. When I was applying for the same position that they were applying for, I told them how I couldn't answer the interviewer when she asked me if I could name one social media platform that was famous at the time. At that time, Facebook was the biggest social media platform and I used it every day. However, I couldn't answer such a simple question. The interviewer waited for several seconds for my answer and then silently said, "Facebook." Still today, I can't understand how I couldn't answer such a simple question. The story made the students laugh and feel relaxed because they could see that I had also been in their places. Sharing my own embarrassing stories helped them feel assured that we are all human, and we all make mistakes in this type of stressful situations. Chapter 4. Ask questions instead of giving orders. Asking questions has plentiful benefits. First, it allows you to come to your own conclusions independently. People like their own ideas better. Second, it gives control to the person, making them feel important instead of following someone else's orders. Third, it stimulates the creativity of your partner. New and better ideas might actually come out. Here are a few questions you can use. Do you think that would work? What do you think of this, Sana? Can we think of different ways to do it? Chapter 5. Let the person save face. People crave importance. If you bulldoze this importance away, the person will resent you and become more difficult to influence later. Let them preserve their pride. The book doesn't give clear directives on a general way of how to do this, but it centers around preserving the person's pride and what they care about. For example, when the employee made a mistake, she apologized for the errors and said she would have the new reports before the next meeting. Instead of berating her for the carelessness, the manager thanked her for her work, mentioned that it wasn't an unusual error for a new project, expressed his faith in her, and acknowledged that she had done her best. Chapter 6. Praise every slightest improvement. Praising every improvement inspires the other person to keep on improving. Keep in mind that people crave importance like food, and giving them a little bit of praise makes them hungry for more. I personally believe in the power of this tactic because I have seen how it works in my own experience. It changed me from being a non-communicative person to a team leader who managed 25 people and gave presentations in front of hundreds of people. If you're going to apply this tactic, please give specific praise, single out a specific accomplishment instead of general flattering remarks. This makes your praise sound more sincere. I remember when I started my second job, many of my colleagues in the office warned me to be very careful with one of the boys in India. They told me that he was quite lazy, replied to emails very late, and the quality of his work wasn't good. Several of my colleagues even complained to his managers, but it didn't change a lot of things. Once I started working with him, I could see that my colleagues were right. But instead of focusing on his mistakes, I decided to apply Carnegie's principles and focus on small positive things and praise him genuinely. So whenever I saw even a small good work from his side, I praised him for that specific work and sometimes added his managers to the carbon copy. After some time, the number of good works started to increase, and after 7 weeks, he was a completely different person. He became very proactive and friendly in his communication, and it wasn't just with me, it was towards others as well. He even added me as a friend on Facebook, which never happened to any of my colleagues before. Chapter 7. Give the person a fine reputation to live up to. If you want to improve something about a person, act as if it was already one of their outstanding characteristics. For example, let's say that during a conversation with your friend, one of them mentions that they know you as a person who can keep a good secret and can be trusted no matter what the conditions are. The rest of your friends also agree with this opinion. After hearing this, even if you are not a person who can keep a good secret, you'll start acting like one. You'll be very careful not to lose this status, speaking cautiously to avoid revealing someone's secret and maintaining your valuable title. Chapter 8. Make the fault seem easy to correct. If you tell someone they lack the talent and will never be good at something, you've removed interest and hope for improvement. Instead, tell them they have the right talent and fundamentals, but just need to practice to get better. Outline the steps for improvement. For example, here's what a dance instructor could say to a poor dancer. You have a natural sense of rhythm. You are a natural-born dancer. Chapter 9. Make the person happy about doing the things you suggest. This principle is similar to one of the previous principles, which was about keeping another person's interest in mind. I personally think that talking only about other people's interests can raise suspicions. For example, if someone is talking only about your interests without theirs, you might suspect that not everything is being revealed. One way to avoid sounding disingenuous is to acknowledge why you want the action and then talk about the benefits you both enjoy. That's it for this video. If you found it helpful, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. It keeps me motivated to post videos for you every single week. Thanks for watching and have a great day.